I'm going to get to highlights and then our panel, but your bottom line on last night. What was it?
Well, I think the headline, the takeaway is going to be a couple days from now, after all the debates are over, that on the first night, they didn't go after Joe Biden.
Right.
And when you're sitting with 42, 43% in the early states and they're not attacking you, that's an interesting dynamic. Also, for Americans, this election is about one thing. It's about one man.
Right.
It's about Donald Trump. And I would, again, it was just a little congressional seat. But when I ran in 1994, we had 11 people in the field.
Yeah.
I never, and I was the underdog. I never talked about one of them. I stayed laser focused on Bill Clinton. Everywhere I went. Would you like some coffee? Oh, I don't know. How much will Bill Clinton's tax increase cost me to have that coffee?
Oh.
Of course, as you said, we became friends later. But that's what you have to do. And last night, they didn't go after Biden. They didn't go after Trump. And I think it was a missed opportunity.
It got a little wayward at times.
One other thing, too, that people may not want to hear, but Jeff Greenfield wrote a great column about this last night. If you want the Democrats to defeat Donald Trump, I'm very concerned by people casually embracing Medicare for all. Because when you drill down into that issue, even among Democrats, and start telling people what that means for them, suddenly it becomes very unpopular. That is something, I promise you, Donald Trump and his team, they've already got the quotes from last night. If any of those people are nominees, they will go there tonight. I still don't understand why this Democratic field doesn't say, we passed Obamacare.
Right.
That was a remarkable achievement. Let's mend it, not end it. Let's keep going in that direction. And they can do that and win the election because Obamacare is extraordinarily popular now because of Donald Trump.
They should own it. All right, so I'm going to set it up, and then, Willie, you take it. I'm a little distracted. Are those espresso shots over there? Can I have those? Can you just come?
You want all those?
What? Well, they're sitting here. They're getting. Oh, they're not. Oh, yeah. Pass them out, and I'll frame the morning. Senator Elizabeth Warren was center stage last night in the debate. She started really strong, tailoring her answers to the backbone of her campaign, leveling the economic playing field. Take a look.
When you've got a government, when you've got an economy that does great for those with money and isn't doing great for everyone else, that is corruption, pure and simple. Now, look, we've had the laws out there for a long time to be able to fight back. What's been missing is courage. Courage in Washington to take on the giants. That's part of the corruption in this system. I want to return government to the people, and that means calling out the names of the monopolists and saying, I have the courage to go after them. Here's what I propose for an industrial policy. Start with a place where there's a real need. There's going to be a worldwide need for green technology, ways to clean up the air, ways to clean up the water. And we can be the ones to provide that. We need to go tenfold in our research and development on green energy going forward. And then we need to say, any corporation can come and use that research. They can make all kinds of products from it, but they have to be manufactured right here in the United States of America.
So because the night was split 10-10, and Bernie Sanders and Joe Biden were not there last night, Elizabeth Warren had the benefit of appearing like the front runner. She stood in the center of the stage. She got the first question.
She owned
had a number of follow-ups. That first hour, she looked like the front runner in the race. Of course, it was only half of the race. She sort of disappeared, John, in the second half, partly because some of the questions weren't directed to her, partly because she didn't jump in as aggressively as some of the other candidates did, trying to get their moment and get their time. But did she do the right thing by just standing there looking like the front runner and then sort of holding the ball for the second half and playing out the clock?
I want to say first that I've been here for only a couple minutes. I already learned something I didn't know before. You ran for Congress?
I don't like to talk about it.
You were in Congress in the 1990s?
I'm a humble man. I don't like to talk about that.
I got a lot of stories you must be able to tell about
Well,
that.
let me tell you one. So I'm standing there and there's Newt Gingrich. Right.
Oh, my gosh.
To Joe's point, which I totally agree with, that the two big, giant headlines of the night, the whole stage not taking on Joe Biden, the whole stage not taking on Donald Trump, with the exception of Jay Inslee, who got the biggest round of applause the one moment when he did go after Donald Trump. The other big story on this stage, no one taking on Elizabeth Warren. And so if you look at, you go into these debates and the first question you ask is, for all of them, did they improve or not move the needle on or decrease their chance of being the Democratic nominee? And second, just from where they stand, are they better off than when they started the night? In both those cases, for Elizabeth Warren, she started out strong. She was on this stage was the front runner. A lot of acres between her and the rest of the candidates in terms of her polling performance right now. She started out the night there. At the end of the night, she was still the front runner on this stage. She was still in the top tier among all of the Democrats. And because she was so strong in that first part of the debate, she made a lot of points out of her campaign stump speech that she just rammed home in the first half an hour to 45 minutes. She walks out of here in a better place than she started the night and in a better position to be the Democratic nominee than the night started. So I think it's a huge win for Elizabeth Warren. And I will say that I always, over the course of the night, am talking to a bunch of former Clinton and former Obama communicators and people on rival campaigns. Everyone I talked to, maybe a dozen and a half people over the course of the night of that Democratic side, everyone said Elizabeth Warren had a great night.
Absolutely.
No dispute whatsoever from anybody, including people on rival campaigns.
John Heilman, I saw, and I'll take it to Adrian this week and drive this point home, but I saw some really great things for women happening with Elizabeth Warren last night because she was aggressive, she was pissed off, she was very, very clear about her point. She made it very clear she has lived her message. She has lived the dream that she has for American consumers, for Americans overall in terms of their economic security. And on top of it, all the stereotypes that you didn't want to have for a woman hold her back, she just threw it away and said, I don't care. I am going to be aggressive. I am going to be angry because that's what I am right now. And it doesn't matter whether I'm a man or a woman. I know my stuff. I know I can do it. And I'm showing you I will fight hard. And then the second half, I thought it was strategy. You know what? All those guys look kind of dumb jumping all over each other. And she knew she had won it from the get-go. Why then play into the stereotypes that could hurt her and jump into aggressively? She had already done it. She had won.
She had won, Mika, and she owned this night. This was her debate to lose, and she did not lose it. She won this debate hands down last night, fair and square. To your point, style, I think oftentimes we don't talk enough about what style and how important style means when you're on the debate stage. The fact that she wasn't jumping into the fray during the second half of the debate and doing this whole, holding up my hand, me, call on me, even made her look, I think, more presidential. She had a strong command on the issues. And I think part of the issue with Elizabeth Warren, people have said, well, yeah, she knows the economy really well. She's very strong on economic issues, but is she good on other issues? And I think last night she showed that she has a strong command of all the issues that the presidents have to deal with.
That confidence was what carried her.
So, Eddie, who stood out to you? Winners, losers? What?
So I think I agree with everyone about Elizabeth Warren. I think Julian Castro did an extraordinary job around the immigration question. I think his point that we should be pissed off hit really hard. I think Amy Klobuchar had along with Governor Inslee, had one of the best lines last night in terms of President Trump doing foreign policy in his bathrobe at 5 a.m. in the morning. I thought Cory Booker had some interest, had some great moments as well. De Blasio seemed a bit thirsty. I think that's a word we can use on Morning Joe. Yeah. He seemed to kind of jump in, trying to pull the party to the left in interesting sorts of ways. But overall, I actually like that Trump was not at the center of the debate. I actually like the fact that this Democratic field decided to double down on substance. That what we are living in is a moment where there's an assault on seriousness, that we have to deal with the P.T. Barnum in the White House every single day. So we had folk on stage, the first 10, literally going through substantive policy issues.
And by the way,
that affect everyday ordinary
not only talking substantive policy, but also making it a very boring night for fact checkers who haven't slept for 2.5 years. I mean, seriously? The fact checkers last night.
They took a break. They could take the night off.
There was a line that you just knew was going to be fact checked, which was that terrorists in Gitmo have better health care policy than refugees.
Exactly.
Fact checked.
The border, yeah.
True.
Exactly. Yeah. I mean, over and over again, what I thought the candidates did last night, and I think they did it very well, was to point to, in some ways, the seriousness of the problems we face as a country. and to do so in a with a fact-based reality.
Yeah.
And that juxtaposition, it's almost like in writing, Joe. If you tell your reader every time that you're about to do something, then the reader says, you don't trust me.
Yeah.
So on the stage last night, I think the candidate said, we trust you, America, to listen substantively to our policy positions. And I think that's a good thing for Democrats to do.
All right. In the Bulwark, Jonathan V. Last writes in a piece entitled Circular Firing Squad, the Winners, Losers, and the Other Losers from the First Democratic Debate. Quote, in the course of 2 hours, various Democratic candidates for president argued for confiscatory tax rates, abolishing private health insurance, completely unfair abortion with no restrictions whatsoever, either the buyback or outright confiscation of legally owned guns, reducing illegal immigration to a civil offense, letting the Taliban live in peace. Any one of these positions is enough to cost Democrats the 2020 election. Imagine if the eventual nominee has to sign on to 3 or 4 of them. But the best news for Trump is that the Democrats barely talked about him. Joe, do you agree with that? I
think Democrats need to be very careful. We saw, Willie, as the Democratic contest started up a couple of months ago, Donald Trump's campaign speech sharpening up. And he would take the weaknesses from one candidate's platform or another that's out of the mainstream of mainstream Americans. And I do think that's something that Democrats need to be cognizant of. If the goal is sending Donald Trump back to Mar-a-Lago, then, and I think that is a goal for absolutely everybody that's running, then I do think they need to be a bit more careful moving forward.
Well, that's always the tension.
Now, of course, I'm a former Republican.
Right.
I'm a conservative. People can get angry at me.
No, but you're right.
But I trust me, nobody wants Donald Trump to be sent home more than I do. So I'm saying this as somebody.
Well, that's always the tension in a primary. How far left do you have to go to win the Democratic primary? And then are you able to then tack back to the center to run? Joe Biden is trying to occupy that middle space. I think you saw in some cases Tim Ryan and Beto O'Rourke trying to pull back a little bit on the Medicare for All, for example. And then you had Mayor de Blasio jumping in and going after Beto O'Rourke on that question. People talking about eliminating private insurance. That's not going to play well in a general election. There are a lot of people who like their private insurance. You had some of the candidates talking about an alternative. So the question will be, how far left is the eventual nominee dragged throughout this process? And last night, a lot of them are already pretty far left, but some of them were dragged that way as well. And the ones who wouldn't go there were attacked by those on the left.
And by the way, John, there's such an obsession sometimes in these primaries where you think, oh, I've got to go as far right as I can go in the Republican primary or as far left. Sometimes you can do what Donald Trump did in South Carolina. And be in one of the most conservative states in America, one of the most conservative Republican electorates in America, and say really nice things about Planned Parenthood, and people shrug it aside. Americans are not as ideological as we all think they are.
It's true, and there's no doubt that there's a dynamic where the policy competition, the bidding up on the left or on the right, if you're in a Republican primary, can be a dangerous thing. I will say, though, that there are some positions that someone who's writing for the Bulwark or someone who ran for Congress in the Republican Party in 1994 thinks are way out of the mainstream. And I just, in general, we often don't really get where the middle in American politics actually is. And so there are things on health care, for instance. Yeah.
Medicare for all.
Yeah.
Go.
And an issue where there's overwhelming popular support, much more so than people, I think, what the mainstream of the pundit class thinks, for all of the following: Medicare for all, single payer. Right. All of those issues turn out to be much more popular in the electorate than we sometimes like to admit. So,
but not when you start explaining them.
Well, it depends on various things that get kind of complicated. Does Medicare for all include an exception to allow you to buy your own private health insurance, for instance? Many people think that there's a wide swath of support for government health care in this country, as long as you allow people to not have their private insurance taken away from them. So a lot of times the devil is in the details, and it is true that if you let yourself get caricatured by Donald Trump as being a socialist too far on the left, that you're going to be in trouble. But that's going to have a lot to do with how the quality of the candidate and their ability to make an argument, and they're going to have to fight that battle every day with Donald Trump. I just want to say one thing about what Eddie Glaude said a second ago, which is to go back to my informal panel of Democratic communicators. the group that Eddie picked out there, if you think about people who, of unanimity among my Democratic sources who did well last night. The person who most radically improved their prospect, Julian Castro, who came from almost nowhere to widespread. You looked at the social media feedback, the number of searches on Google, trending on Twitter. People talk. Julian Castro was nowhere before this debate started. Cory Booker had a very good night, I think, in a lot of people's judgment. And then there's Amy Klobuchar, who I found a really interesting split, where a lot of men in the Democratic political class were kind of like, and all of the women thought she did incredibly well. So, and it was just a really striking pattern where female Democrats were like, wow, Amy was great, and some of the men were more of a shrug. Not that she did badly, but were not as enthusiastic as the women were.
3 women on stage, and we are talking about them throughout this block. I like it. It's good morning. Still ahead on Morning Joe, we have a jam-packed show today. 4 Democratic 2020 candidates will join the conversation right here on Morning Joe, including former HUD Secretary Julian Castro, had a great night last night. Former Congressman Beto O'Rourke, who squared off over immigration last night during the debate. Plus, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio and Congressman Tim Ryan of Ohio will also be our guests.
Thanks for checking out MSNBC on YouTube, and make sure you subscribe to stay up to date on the day's biggest stories. And you can click on any of the videos around us to watch more from Morning Joe and MSNBC. Thanks so much for watching.